Hello, welcome to Crime Clueless. I'm your host, Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
Thank you so much for coming back for part 2 of this crazy case of Rey Rivera. If you have not listened to part 1, please go listen to that first and get caught up, and then come and listen to this one, which is part 2. Are you guys ready to dive into the crazy, baffling, mysterious circumstances of this case?
Let's do it.
I'm ready.
Definitely need to hear how this one ends.
All right, let's go. So, on May 24th, 2 days later, Allison got the call she'd been dreading. Ray's body was discovered 8 days after his disappearance. Police tell her that it was found in a meeting room at the Belvedere Hotel.
What?
Police tell Allison that a few of Ray's coworkers had decided to use their lunch break looking for Ray. Maybe because it is right by the office and where his car was found, they decided to go look around where the car was found.
But for 8 days in a public place? No one?
You would
Yep.
I feel like be able
Yep.
to smell something after
Someone's
like 2 days.
cleaning
So-
in the
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
I'll show you pictures. But again, like, it's not a hotel that people are coming and going at. And this is actually called like an annex that's connected to the hotel. And back in the day when it was a hotel, that's where like the swimming pool was. And then they decided it's not a hotel and they don't need the swimming pool anymore. So they changed this to a meeting room. And actually for quite a while, up until the beginning of May, a church group had used it for their meetings until they found somewhere else. And so it just wasn't used at all by anyone. There is an author that lives in the hotel who said that a lot of people that lived there actually still thought that it was a pool that they just didn't go to. Like, it was never used. It wasn't in the hotel.
Okay.
And it was actually kind of in this hallway where a parking garage was connected. People in the parking garage sort of noticed that
And
smell.
going past it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is kind of interesting that 3 people that worked at Stanberry and Associates are the ones that found where he was. My guess is they're looking for any kind of clue. They've seen the posters. They know what he had on him, what he was wearing. They're up on this parking structure. They're looking around, and from the parking structure, you can see a lot of the city around, and you can also see rooftops. As they're looking around, they spot flip-flops on the rooftop that's down from the parking structure. And we know Ray was wearing flip-flops when he left home, and it's on the missing person poster. And then they spot a phone. And as they're trying to see better, because it is down and kind of a ways, one of them spots what looks like a hole in the roof.
Oh.
So these guys call the police to come see if what they're looking at is connected to Ray. And I'll show you a picture of the hole.
Oh.
So you can see, that's kind of what you can see this first one, which I'll post. And you can kind of see what they saw from on top of the parking structure. And then the second picture is looking up through the hole.
It looks like
A
he
person-sized hole.
Yeah,
That's what it looks like.
it looks
Yep.
like he was standing in the wrong spot and just fell through.
Possibly.
Or if he
Just another viewpoint, and you can kind of see the skylight windows and this hole.
is the parking structure they were looking at directly above that, did you say, or is it a little bit further away?
It's a little bit further away, but it is right on the other side. It is the parking structure for the hotel.
Okay.
This event brought a tragic end to their search, but now we have a whole series of baffling questions that deepens this mystery. Police had searched the hotel before.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about the rooms.
Right. They said that key areas like this annex roof and the conference rooms were initially overlooked. Police arrive and a building manager takes them to the room that would be beneath the hole. And before they even open the door, they smell what they know is a body.
Mm-hmm.
The building manager said that opening that door and seeing what he saw, he would never want for anyone. He was traumatized by this and said from then on, when he would open doors, especially at his job at the hotel, he would worry about discovering a body or just be afraid of what was on the other side.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
awful. Here in this conference room, they discover Ray. He's lying face up.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it's been 8 days. It's nearly summer. It's really warm. Decomp of the body is really extreme already. And this, unfortunately, because it took so long, makes it really hard to determine the time of death for medical examiners. Let me show you the room. That's what it looks like, and that's where he was. I showed you the hole. It's really small. Basically exactly the size needed for a human body to pass through. And again, we talked about, Ray is tall, he's athletic, he's 260 pounds. Some people have said they're not even sure if Ray could fit through that. Investigators concluded that it had been caused by someone falling or jumping from a significant height. The location of the hole raised immediate questions, though. The annex roof is about 45 feet away from the Belvedere's main structure. It makes it really unlikely that someone could have jumped there without help. Let me tell you about the hotel real quick. It's more than just like a hotel, it's a really historic landmark. It has its own unique history. It was built in 1903 and it was once called Baltimore's crown jewel. It hosted presidents, celebrities, social elites. It's got really ornate architecture and it has a really important history, and it's kind of a symbol of luxury and refinement. So in 1991, the hotel began to transform into condos and business spaces, and by 2006, the Belvedere had fully transitioned from the high-end hotel to that mixed-use space we talked about that has the condos, the event spaces, even businesses have space in there. It's still, is charming. It has a good reputation. It also has quite the history, which is probably a whole nother episode because this is not the first death to happen at this hotel. The annex where his body was discovered, like I said, is older. It's very much less used. It doesn't look anything like the rest of the hotel. And like I said, nobody goes there. The author that I was talking about, she lived there. Her name is Makita Brotman. She wrote a really interesting, detailed book about this, and it's fascinating, goes into a ton of detail, and I'll link it in the show notes. She is the one that said, we actually still even thought that it was a pool.
Well, and
It just was never used.
something that just is bothering me is like if he jumped onto the roof, he would have still had his flip flops on.
Right.
Yeah.
Why were they on the roof?
And the phone, too.
Right. It's not like those. I mean, his phone could fall out of his pocket.
True.
But his shoes would still be on his feet, or they would have gone through with him. This doesn't make sense to me.
Seems like you would have a bigger hole too, because if you're jumping, you're not jumping like you're diving into the swimming pool. Like your arms are going to be out. There's going to be more than just a perfect round hole to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking like 180 feet up. And so, yeah, shifting or especially a hole that they're saying they're not even sure if you could
Yeah.
fit through. We will talk more about the flip-flops in a second because, yes. Have you ever been running down the street and a flip-flop falls off? Tennis shoes, I think, would for sure be on his feet.
You are trying to run away. Running in flip-flops is hard.
It is.
Yes.
It just, to me, it sounds like they were placed by the hole for someone to see. They'd be like, oh, look, there's his flip flops and there's a hole. Let's check in there. Like, it seems to me
Suspicious.
very
Yes.
staged.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not the only one that thinks that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yep. Which is why this case is so intriguing and also baffling and frustrating. Before we move on to those things, I'll read a quote to you just about finding Ray. Allison said, "Finding Ray didn't bring closure. It just brought more pain and confusion. We didn't just lose him. We lost the truth about what happened to him."
Really sad.
It is. Let's talk about how impossible this actually was. Like I mentioned, the hotel's historic. The rooftop is not something that people can use. It's not easy to get to. And Investigators could find no evidence of how Ray could have even reached the roof without being seen or without help. Doors are locked. You have to go into back places that only, workers are allowed in. It's not an easy place to get to where they throw parties.
Not like there was like a fire escape or like an
Right.
easy accessible staircase.
Right. All of that. And then, stranger, no witnesses come forward to report seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of May 16th. However, in the author, Makita, that we talked about, her book, she said that police didn't go door to door asking. It was more like, if you saw something, let me know. But how many people might have missed that?
Right.
We've got all the locked doors. You've got unmarked stairwells. It's really hard to get to. So right away, because of how hard it is to get to, I think that helped investigators decide that this was a suicide. They, are thinking like, if there's a will, there's a way. And if you really want to do it and you don't want anyone to hear or know what happened, that means suicide. Like if you're being forced up there, someone would have heard it, right? There are other things that they decide mean suicide, and other people that have investigated are saying, no, this does not add up. This case is technically still open, but it wouldn't be open if the medical examiner had not ruled it undetermined compared to suicide. Like I mentioned before, Baltimore had a ton of crime during this time, and it's actually only gone up from back then. Ray died in 2006, and 276 of the 4,323 bodies autopsied by the Baltimore Medical Examiner's Office were labeled homicide. In 2006, the Baltimore homicide rate was 43.3%. Now, the national average homicide rate was 5.8%.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Per every 100,000 people, on average, 5.8 are victims of homicide in the country in 2006, and in Baltimore, it's 43.3.
Wow.
Wow.
So 7 times the national average. And they had statistics to show that a lot of Baltimore homicides were gang related. And unfortunately, like I said, Baltimore's homicide rate has only increased. It was 57.8 in 2017 and 58.6 in 2019. It is kind of interesting and logical to assume that the number of homicides in Baltimore could have overwhelmed the medical examiner's office. When someone dies, the medical examiner will label the death as one of 5 causes: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. So undetermined means they can't decide if it was suicide or an accident or homicide. In 2004, 10% of Baltimore City deaths were labeled undetermined by the medical examiner's office. And then by 2006, undetermined was 20%.
Wow.
Yeah. Compared to other major cities, 10% undetermined is incredibly high. And like I said, they got up to 20% by 2006. Goes to show maybe how overworked investigators, the medical examiners, everybody that's working these cases maybe is, right? When they found Ray, they found his phone, his glasses, and his flip-flops. All of those things were on the roof that he went through. His glasses were fine. They weren't broken. They survived the fall, able to be used again. I don't know about you, but dropping something 11, 14 stories up, 180 feet, that seems...
I think even just dropping your glasses off your head, they shatter.
They can, yes.
Absolutely. So let me show you. This is the Belvedere Hotel. This is the hotel. And again, I will post these pictures. And this is where the hole was. These are the places up on top where they're saying he jumped from. There's this ledge that's a little bit further down, but it is impossible to get to, even more so than the roof. All of these small little rectangles that you can see are like half windows, and they're all within an office space or somebody's condo, and the ledge is incredibly narrow. Even though it is a little bit closer to the hole, it still doesn't seem likely that you could get out one of those windows and get onto the ledge. Also, it's 45 feet between the hotel and where he landed. They've done the math on this, and you would have to be running at 11 miles an hour to travel that far in the distance that they had.
There's no way.
In flip flops. One of the flip flops was broken on one of those straps on the side. And they're like Old Navy flip flops, regular basic ones that you can run around doing whatever, but literally you cannot run around in them.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
No. You know, also, when we look at this distance, you're thinking about the glasses falling. Also, he had a phone that was on the roof. The screen wasn't even shattered. And I'll post a picture of the phone.
Phone can't even fall out of your pocket without breaking.
No.
I mean, those
And
ones were a little bit more sturdy, but
Yes.
Those were bricks, but still.
Pre iPhone, you know, like you said, 2 feet up, you're dropping it, it's shattering. But this is, you know, the Nokia brick phone. It's durable, but still.
that far and not even a cracked screen.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be able to drop one of those 120, 180 feet and have it land on the hard roof. We're not landing on grass, you know, and see how it holds up. Finding all of those things on top of the roof definitely adds to the mystery in this case. I feel like you could account for one of the things or one of the other things, but when you put it all together, it's
Again, it seems like it was
How?
placed there.
exactly.
So they were on the roof next to the hole, right? They weren't on top of something else. It was just around the hole. They were just placed there.
Yep.
Okay.
Or fell
Yeah.
there. I mean, it seems wild that also they could all go with him and land. If it really was falling that far and he was traveling 11 miles an hour before he jumped, it seems like they wouldn't land all
Together?
in a nice, like, neat.
Especially that far,
No.
like
place.
maybe one would have fallen on the street or blown, I mean, flip-flops are not heavy.
Exactly. And that's exactly it, too. If the flip flops fell off, you know, after he took off the building, you would think the trajectory would be
Yes,
different.
for sure.
Yeah. If they stayed on his feet the whole time, they would have gone through the roof
Yeah.
with him, right? Let's talk about his autopsy.
Real quick, what is the distance from that little ledge? Like if he had happened to get up on that little ledge, because that wouldn't have been the 45 feet, would it?
It's still, I think, 30 feet.
Okay.
So he still would have had to be running.
Right.
On that tiny ledge.
There's just nothing right in front of where that hole is. It just doesn't make sense. And then also, this is the parking garage that they were on, which I'll post. So it's 20 feet down and 20 feet over. But they say that it's just not that far to fall.
No.
Probably he would have survived that fall.
Yeah.
So, and it's still, I mean, 20 feet, you still have to go 20 feet out, which
Yeah.
is not nothing. Okay, so his autopsy. Unfortunately, it's impossible to know his exact time of death because decomposition was just too extreme. They estimate that it was at least a week. They really don't get any more specific than that. The toxicology report comes back and it says there's no drugs in his system. There are no antidepressants or any prescribed drugs. There is a tiny bit of alcohol, but that could actually be related to decomposition. And I know that we'll talk about this more in future episodes. This phenomenon is called post-mortem ethanol production. So it's observed when the body has been deceased for an extended period, particularly under conditions that promote decomposition, just like in this case. And I've even seen ones where it's only been 12 hours and the blood alcohol is raised significantly. In any case, we can't really say if he had any alcohol or not. It's not that high anyways. So the autopsy describes all of Ray's injuries, and I'll post a picture of that. These include 24 broken ribs, 2 punctured lungs, damage to his heart and liver, torn neck muscles, multiple skull fractures, broken pelvis, a ruptured testicle, and cuts and bruises all over his arms, legs, and torso. And some of these cuts are pretty extreme around his rib cage on each side. On one side, he has one that's 9 inches by 7 inches. And on the other side, it's 9 inches by 4 inches. His legs are broken, and some of the breaks are so bad they're sticking out, and you can see the muscles and tendons. But the interesting thing is, typically in falls this high up, the injuries tend to be more evenly distributed or centered, like on the landing surface. And so technically you could say, if he landed on his left side, that's where most of his injuries are. But to fit through that hole, he would have had to go straight through. And you can see there are no broken bones on his right foot. There's a little bit to his left foot. And then also his, shins are broken. They're saying, okay, well, if he fell and say that he hit things on his way down, then maybe, or if he landed on one of his sides, like I said, or there was some kind of rotation during the fall. Again, just looking at the hole in the roof, you didn't have that. And then, they do go and look, and they say there's no evidence of him hitting anything on the main structure of the hotel.
Well, and isn't there a lot of skull and facial fractures there?
Right. And
So it seems like you wouldn't get that and the feet fractures.
Yeah, it would be one or the other.
Right. I could see the skull fractures if he landed on his head, but then you wouldn't have the broken feet and shins and things like that unless he did hit something. But then you wouldn't get that perfect
You would
hole
like flail
to
down
fit him through.
Yeah.
Well, and it would be probably a longer hole, something that you could fit through sideways or something like that.
Well, and there was nothing to hit. If he jumped off the landing, there's nothing there.
right. So each of those things could be it, but when we put it all together, it can't be all of those things.
No.
Doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. Like if the hole were, as long as he is, it would make sense with the left side, and maybe that theory would make more sense, but it's just such a crazy trajectory from where he would have had to jump from to where the hole is. And then to say that he's going fast enough, the roof isn't that huge to work up that amount of speed. We've got some theorists that suggest that Ray's injuries maybe don't align with the fall at all and that it was a staged scene. There are many experts who work in this field, and they're either certified medical illustrators or forensic experts that have weighed in. And they note that injuries that Ray sustained and that are in his autopsy are much more consistent with someone who has been beaten to death or hit by a car. Miriam Moya is one of these forensic experts that agrees with this. She actually specializes in traffic accidents, impact biomechanics, and crime scenes, which sounds like the coolest job ever. And she also has written a book about Ray's case. She says from all of this evidence, it's so much more likely, given these injuries, that, again, he was beaten to death or hit by a car.
Well, okay, I got distracted for a second and I Googled the average human can run 6 to 7 miles per hour.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We're saying like you're
Thank you, ADHD.
always thank you to the ADHD. So we're saying, okay, you would have to get up to that extreme, which is not normal.
It said, so I did Google also if normal people can run 11 miles per hour, and it said trained athletes can. So he was athletic, but unless he's a runner, it seems unlikely that he could, unless it was, someone chasing him, huge effort trying to go as fast as he can, but that's not an average speed or something.
Especially if he was up on that
typical.
little ledge. Like, he's a big guy. You're going to run 11 miles per hour, sprint off the edge, and
No.
dive perfectly into... I don't think so. I don't think so.
Doesn't make sense.
Okay, sorry.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then you add on the flip-flops, by the way.
Flip-flops.
Oh, yeah. And flip-flops.
Yes.
Somehow fly off right by the hole.
Right by it. So that hole actually was investigated extensively, and there are no there's no evidence of blood or anything else that would say that someone went through it.
Okay, yeah, no. There would be blood.
So, also along those lines, like I said, the Belvedere has had its own history of suicides and murders. And there was a man who jumped from the 8th floor, which is not the roof. He was found in so much more worse condition than Ray, and essentially every single bone in his body was broken. And he didn't go through a roof, so maybe that changes it, but
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's not adding up here.
there was a camera on the roof of the hotel. You're going to love this. It was working the day before Ray disappeared and the day after, but not the day that he went missing. So there's no footage to see if he was on the roof or, if he was on the roof alone or not. That just always drives me crazy. And it just, one coincidence, but how many coincidences do we?
That doesn't seem like a coincidence.
It really doesn't. There was the camera. The investigators took it. All the other cameras that were around the hotel were working. None of them show Ray on the footage from that day. Some, though, had started recording over with their own recordings because we're talking 8 days. They're not grabbed quickly and looked at, then, you can't have months and months of footage. Allison did go and sit with the manager of the Belvedere Hotel when the footage from the rooftop was returned to them. So it shows the 15th. Then it's just like the footage was deleted or the camera was turned off for the day. And then it went back to recording on the 17th. The annex where Ray was found was off of this hallway that's connected to the parking garage. They didn't do a good job of sectioning it off. They weren't very careful with a lot of the things they found. People that live in the hotel said they saw them laughing and kind of throwing things off the roof when they were investigating it. There's security footage of the hallway and the parking garage, but they never got that footage or reviewed it. Again, they're going with this one theory, and that's what they've decided. They've decided that it's suicide, and so because you think if something did happen, if he was hit by a car, and then they went and parked there, and they put him in that room, and then made the hole, I want to see that footage.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
They never got it. They never looked at it. And maybe it had recorded over. From what I can tell, that wasn't one that had already started recording over. Aside from the hotel cameras and all the CCTV, Ray actually knew several people who worked at the Belvedere. And a couple of the bartenders that he personally knew had worked on the night of the 16th. They never saw him there. And again, he's 6'5", he's athletic, he makes an impression. No one interviewed who worked or lived at the Belvedere remembered seeing Ray there that night.
Someone would have seen him, especially if they know him, they would notice him walk in.
Exactly. Having multiple bartenders that know you, they know who you are, they're working that night. They're like, oh yeah, I saw him come in.
Well, and a lot of people are not 6'5". That makes an impression. You're gonna remember. Oh yeah, I did see that guy. He was really tall, and he's
exactly.
And is he Puerto Rican? Did you say?
I believe so.
So,
but he was born in Madrid. But his family was living in Puerto Rico. Some of them when they got married.
Gotcha.
So.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
But he looks recognizable. He was someone that you would remember. I remember if I see someone that's 6'5",
right?
The norm,
because that's not normal.
Right. So Allison tried to go and speak with the medical examiner. When Allison's talking to them, they tell her that the way that Ray's shins were broken is just not consistent with a fall, which is part of the reason that they're saying the manner of death is undecided. That's one that they just can't wrap up in their, neat little bow and say, okay, this is exactly what it was. But not only that, when Allison was there, the medical examiner says to her, quote, I know what they're trying to do, and we're not closing the case, end quote.
That's interesting.
It is. And I'm so curious to know what that means.
Yeah.
are they saying the police department just needs to label some cases suicide
Homicide rate
because
is high.
they're
Yeah.
right? Or are they saying they just are overwhelmed and they can't keep up? Or is there something darker and more sinister? On that note, let's talk about the note that was found taped to Ray's computer. It's super strange and it's definitely not a suicide note. Allison maintains that if Ray had decided to end his life, which again, she just does not feel there was anything, and you never know what someone is going through. I'll never say that it could never be a suicide, but she's certain that he would have left her a note. We talked about when they were dating and he wrote her
Mm-hmm.
the most beautiful love notes all the time. I mean, that's what he enjoyed doing. And this note is the only one that's ever found. And they did go through all of his journals, they went through his computer. But this note brings up so many more questions. The note was found taped to the back of his computer monitor, wrapped in plastic. It's a 2-page typed note that really has been endlessly speculated about. It feels cryptic. It feels like on top of everything else that we know about this case now, it's just really interesting. The note seems to reflect Ray's intellectual and creative mind, but it also just doesn't make sense. Allison says in the Unsolved Mysteries episode that she knows the note was recent because there were parts ripped off of the page and thrown in the garbage that's in the office. The note is filled with a mix of names, quotes, and references. Talked about philosophy, Freemasonry, pop culture. There's tons of names listed, celebrities, and also people he knows. The interesting thing is there are really important people in his life whose names are not on the note. But then there are people like Stanley Kubrick and Christopher Reeves and Tom Cruise.
It's not like a suicide note. It just doesn't feel like one.
No,
It
it's
just doesn't feel
definitely
like
not.
one.
And also you can see, and I'll post these pictures, but you can see the note is only about 2 inches and it's 3-point font. So it's teeny tiny. And that's what it looked like taped to his computer. The first line of the note reads, "Brothers and sisters, right now around the world, volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight." And the second line says, "Whom virtue unites, death cannot separate." These are references to Freemasonry. This motto just is steeped in themes of morality and unity, and also sparks theories about Ray's fascination with secret societies and their symbolic traditions. And Allison agrees with that. When she first read the note, she started Googling some of the lines right away, and she knows these come from Freemasons. She did say that she knew Ray was curious about secret societies, in particular the Freemasons. This note is just so layered. People see it as maybe a window into Ray's love for puzzles. It's interesting because Allison says that it's just Ray. He does this stream of conscious writing where he just writes anything that comes in his mind, and it's actually a writing technique that you can look up that's really interesting. She knows it's not a suicide note, but it is interesting that
Yeah.
it's taped to the back of his computer in plastic and that it's so tiny. People that have looked at it read that it could be, or argue that it could be a coded message or something written under duress. But again, he couldn't have written it when he got the call and left. It's
No.
way too long for that.
Yeah.
But also, we talked about the break ins. We talked about him following her on her run. Was he worried about something that he was just really good at hiding? Did he leave it there deliberately for Allison to find? Was it something he'd been working on? Was it related to a screenplay? It's just really mysterious. The critics that really don't think that he committed suicide point to like how cryptic this note is. And then skeptics argue that the lack of a clear narrative in the note could hint at mental strain, paranoia, or some kind of obsession with hidden meanings. We just don't know. Even today, this note has drawn, people are still posting about it on all the forums. And I saw one where someone went through and tried to write it down. You can see this one that I posted that's from Unsolved Mysteries, where they think that it's a cry for help,
Mm-hmm.
which they wrote on there. A lot of people have drawn comparisons to the 1997 thriller The Game. Have you guys seen that movie?
No.
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 It stars Michael Douglas, and it just tells the story of a wealthy man who's totally burnt out on life. He's lost his passion. He goes looking for something to bring him back to life. His life spirals into chaos after he becomes in this mysterious, all encompassing game that's orchestrated by this shadowy organization. He signed up for it, hoping that it would spark his passion. It's just a lot of parallels from the theme of the movie. And actually, he did write the game on there, on the note, but he also wrote a lot of other movies too. So people have drawn comparisons to, many other directors or types of movies. The crazy thing, though, is in the game, our Michael Douglas character is lured into like this crazy web of psychological manipulation and secrecy and like all of these events that are really detailed, orchestrated to kind of blur the line between reality and fiction. And there are a lot of references to Freemasonry in the movie and in the note. At the end of the movie, the main character is being stalked and attacked, and he is on a rooftop, and he runs to the edge of the building and jumps off, and he goes through a skylight, and he's jumping off because he just wants it all to stop. But in the movie, the character lands like on a giant airbag, and it's almost like a Christmas Carol Scrooge moment. He has a new lease on life with this near-death experience. It is interesting, but also I think you can go back and put things together.
Yeah.
You can draw parallels. You can say this meant that. And like I said, there's so many other things that he wrote in this note. It's one theory that seems to always be brought up.
Especially if there are a lot of other movies written on there too. You can't just pull one movie.
Exactly. But the way that he died, I mean, I showed you the skylights that are on that roof.
Yeah.
And he did go off a building. And so I think that's why the one that's pulled out. But again, it's so much easier to draw like, these two things are related.
Hindsight.
Right. But had it been a different scenario and it would have pulled from a different movie, people would have pulled that one.
Exactly. Yep. So I don't know that there's necessarily any thing between the two, but it is interesting.
There do seem to be a lot of similarities, which is interesting.
Especially if you thought that was still a pool in there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
I didn't either.
Like, again, like the fall injuries aren't the same, but like if you're going to pull parallels from that is similar. But
going through a skylight and landing in a pool.
You wouldn't die, but it would be
maybe.
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, from that high, still might.
From that high, you probably would hit the bottom.
His mind, he thought that he was recreating it, but
oh my gosh, you guys are so smart. This is why we need new fresh set of eyes on these cases. That is amazing, Krista.
If he was in with, some people who were conspiracy theorists and they knew, about that movie too, as something maybe they had talked about, if they thought they were recreating this after he had already died, because it seems to me like he died before and was placed in that room.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
I don't feel like he could have, especially if there was no blood through that hole. I don't feel like he could have gone through that hole.
I feel like there would have been blood on the roof too.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like that. I mean, it would have to be a perfect.
At least something.
Yeah. Something.
And maybe that was kind of created before he was placed in there and they thought they were going to put him in the pool as like to reference that.
Absolutely.
But once you're there, I mean, you don't drag a dead body in there and then drag it back out.
Right.
And your risk being seen again. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't even think he could have been put through that hole after he died if he had all those injuries.
No, there still would have been blood.
Have been blood.
And someone would have seen something.
Yeah.
I mean, all those windows look out over that roof, right?
Yeah.
Would they have seen someone making a hole though?
I mean would you hear someone go through a roof? I would think.
Yeah,
And
that would make a big
And-
noise.
Yeah.
I think you would hear someone making a hole, but maybe not.
I don't know.
I mean, if they're saying that the hole looks too small and someone went out there and just punched something through, maybe you miss it, especially if it's the middle of the night. You're in Baltimore, there's lots of noises, but
Yeah.
Well, okay, question then that brings up. Did they make any notes about debris on him? Because if the hole was made by him, then the debris would be under him a little bit
Yeah.
on top of him. If the hole was made when he was already there, the debris would be entirely on
Yeah.
top of him. There would
there
be
should at
nothing
least
under
be
him.
debris somewhere.
They should be able to tell by the debris if the hole was made before or after he
Mhm.
went through it. I would think.
Yeah,
I don't
Would
know.
too.
That makes sense to me.
It absolutely does. And you look at this picture, and it's right from when, right after he was removed, and they're still,
Looks pretty clean.
canvassing the scene. I mean, you don't see any anywhere. I'm going to have to look into that. Write it down.
Krista,
I got
you're up.
it. I got it.
That is a really good point. And I did not see reference to that in anything I read or watched. So I will look that up. Wow. It's just, there's so many pieces to this that just make no sense. And again, somebody had to see something, somebody knows something, unless it truly was suicide. But then we have all the other
Mhm.
questions. With that note, like I said, Allison and Ray talk about that stream of, or Allison and Ray's brother, I'm sorry, talk about that stream of consciousness, how he does that all the time. They're just saying, we know it's not a suicide note. We know he would have left a suicide note, but no, we don't think the note means anything. But it is a really interesting piece of the puzzle because she does say that it's incredibly recent. So Allison thought then, and then, she says it years later, that she believes Ray stumbled onto something accidentally or on purpose related to Agora Financial, something he wasn't supposed to see or something he wasn't supposed to know. She didn't have any idea what it was back in 2006 or when she filmed the Unsolved Mysteries episode in 2020, and she's in that episode a lot. Again, this case is just so perplexing, starting with the alarm going off in their home, the phone call, the impossibility of how he ended up where he did with the injuries he had, his phone, his glasses, his flip-flops, the note, the camera footage. Oh, I forgot to mention there was also a detective on his case, really the only one that was leaning to homicide. And about 3 weeks after he was found, that detective was reassigned to another case. And then, his work
That's
associate,
suspicious.
Yes.
like the only one, and there was no reason for him to be reassigned.
Really interesting.
One of these things we can explain away, maybe two of them, but all of them, I don't know. Do you guys have any theories or thoughts or questions?
I agree. I mean, I think he found something at Agora he wasn't supposed to.
Mhm.
Like, especially if he's a writer and they do like investigations, things like that. I mean, it would make the most sense. I mean, okay, this is from a sitcom, but the two brothers in the middle, they are the ones who, are the ones who tipped the cow. So they put up their money for the reward because they know that no one's going to come forward with information. The fact that Porter's the one who put the money up for the reward.
And the
I mean,
private detective. Mhm.
Exactly. Like that to me seems a little iffy.
So, and even on that note, I mean, say someone did come forward with information, $5,000 to him was absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Like, he flew to their hotel in his own private, or not his hotel, sorry, to their wedding in his own private helicopter. He was very well off. So, I mean, there's even comments like that he only put up 5,000. Along those lines, he could have put up a lot more and maybe actually had someone come forward with that. Or say he put that up, it's no big deal if someone comes forward, but then he takes that information to his private detective.
Yeah.
Right. And that information doesn't get back to the the regular police.
Right.
It's really interesting.
It is.
I do feel like with the cameras being out on that specific day, It's just too much of a coincidence for me to be like, oh, he chose that day to go there and do this, when really it makes more sense that they would be turned off so that a body could be dragged in without it being caught.
Also, along those lines, too, throwing a body off a building out 45 feet, needing to go at that.
Well, and he's not a small guy.
No. And so it would take a lot to do that. But then you look at the cameras being off. Well, so were they off because something actually happened up there? Or did he never even make it up there? But then why were the cameras
Yeah.
off?
Do the cameras capture anything in like that parking structure across the street, or only the rooftop?
Only, well, the rooftop one was off. And then, as far as I know, I haven't seen information on any cameras across the street on.
So the rooftop for the hotel doesn't capture surrounding areas, or could it have? So maybe it was off because something happened
Oh, I see.
around the area that it
Right.
might have been captured
Oh,
by
that's
that
a
camera.
good idea. Right. It could have captured the annex or the parking garage.
Yeah. So if something happened on top of that rooftop and it might have been seen by that camera,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's why it was turned off or deleted, or,
Right. Oh, that brings both of your theories together nicely.
So
That's a good idea.
I don't believe that
I don't believe
And
it.
anything happened. I don't think anything happened from that rooftop unless they were up there somehow and he died up there. But I don't think he went from the
Oh.
rooftop.
That's also possible.
So but how are they going to get him down unless
Yeah.
they threw him off and then went down and dragged him into the annex?
But then I feel like you would still have
There would be
blood
something
or
in
something.
Yeah.
Well, and like Jenna said, the injuries weren't
Consistent. Yeah.
consistent with someone who's fallen. So even if
Yeah.
after the fact, if something had happened up there, he had passed away on the roof, I still don't think, even if the injuries don't show him coming off that roof.
Unless he totally landed on his left side.
I think
But even then, it's such a far fall. And we talked about that guy that fell off of the 8th story.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like you would almost have, I don't know, a splatter. I don't know the correct word for that, but like if you're falling like dead weight, it wouldn't just be some broken bones. I feel like it would be.
It would be a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, compared to other people that have fallen off of buildings, that is absolutely correct.
That's what I was thinking. If something happens in that surrounding area, that it could have
Well,
been
it looks like
seen.
he got hit by a car.
Yeah.
Or if he was beaten,
Right. Seems like it would have happened
could
in
have
the parking
been in
garage.
the parking garage.
And then dragged in there. And then to make it look like a suicide,
they
they
staged
stage
it.
it. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, I think that is my theory as well.
Which is too bad they didn't
really
look
sad.
Yeah,
Right, at
look
the
sooner.
footage or find him sooner or
Yeah.
right. I don't know. Listeners, what do you think? Do you have theories, thoughts, questions? Let us know. Any final thoughts from you ladies?
No, I think we
Yep.
summed it up.
Check out our website, crimeclueless.com. And we've got all of our sources for this episode. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Crime Clueless and let us know what you think. If you want to learn more about the case, check out the Unsolved Mysteries episode on Netflix is a great starting point. And thank you so much for listening. Remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye.
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 Not today, murderers.